Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and we are in Parshat Re'eh. We're getting close to the end of the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, the 5/5 of Moses, is someone I know likes to say. And this is a pretty long one. This is Deuteronomy 11:26 through 16:17. About 5 chapters long. We'll see what we can get through, which, knowing how I usually do things, it's not going to be a lot because we like to get into a lot of side discussions. But we will try our best. So let me share the screen, and we'll take it from there. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to start reading in my best biblical Hebrew possible, learning the pronunciation of what many scholars think. Of course, there's disagreement. It's kind of an ongoing process, so I do the best I can, and it's certainly better than listening to some Ashkenazi Karaite rabbi read it. Well, at least in a certain sense, they do make it different. They do make a distinction between the taf with a nikud in it and the taf without a nikud in it. With the nikud, they say noten, and without nasen. So at least there's that. Okay, so here we are. We are in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26. And Re'eh anochi noten lifanechem hayom biracha ukilala. את הברכה אשר תשמעו אל מצוות יהוה אלוהיכם אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום. Let's just get a little context. So Moses is giving his speech. Right, okay. Excuse me. All right, verse 28. והקללה אם לא תשמעו אל מצוות יהוה אלוהיכם וסרתם מן הדרך אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום ללכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים אשר לא ידעתם. So we have a bracha, a blessing, and a klala. Okay, the blessing, the good things happen if you will listen to the mitzvot, the commandments of Yahweh Elohechem, and asher ani mitzaveh etchem hayom, so that which I, Moshe, is commanding to you today. So these are the commandments of Yahweh, but they're being transmitted to the people by Moshe. Okay, so he makes that explicit here. So keep in mind this phrase Yahweh Elohechem, because it's going to appear a bunch of times in this in the upcoming speech that Moshe gives. Okay, Yahweh Elohechem is Yahweh, your God, your plural God, speaking to the entire people. Okay. And this is going to be the main thing upcoming, okay? Lalechet achrei Elohim acharim. So you don't go after Yahweh Elohechem, Yahweh, your God. Instead of that, you go after Elohim acharim. That's the contrast here, okay? Asher lo yadatem, who you don't know. Okay, no, they always like to say is, there's 2 ways to say no in Hebrew, lahakir and lada'at, okay, and yadad yodea is usually people like to point out that it means carnal knowledge of, but really what it means is to intimately know, to know well, okay, hence carnal knowledge. All right, verse 29. Haya ki yaviacha Yahweh Elohecha el haaretz asher ata ba shama lerishta ונתת את הברכה על הר גריזים ואת הקללה על הר עיבל. Okay, so when you come into the land, or when Yahweh Elohecha, here we have that phrase again. Okay, brings you into the land. You're going to do the on Har Gerizim, which is where the Samaritans believe that the temple is to be built or was built. They believe they actually had a temple there. I guess so, right? And but at any rate, they believe that that's the place that they're going to rebuild the temple. That's where they do their Passover sacrifice each year. So that's where the blessing is going to be given, and the klala on Mount Ebal. Okay, so that's once you enter the land. We see that in the book of Joshua. Okay. אלוהימה בעבר הירדן השמש בארץ הכנעני היושב בערבה מול הגלגל אצל אלוני מורה. So isn't that across the Jordan, the Jordan? אחרי דרך מבוא השמש. So this is interesting, דרך מבוא השמש. So literally this means after the way of the setting of the sun. But is this a place? Because usually this is translated as a place, or at least I've heard that in a couple of places. Let's look at that very quickly. So let's see how Robert Alter, as usual, deals with it. So this is Deuteronomy 11:30. Oops. Yeah, beyond the sunset way. So he does not capitalize it, and I would agree with that. Okay? I would 100% agree with that. Let's see how the NIV deals with that. Or we can just do this parallel. So this is Deuteronomy 11:30. Okay, so towards the setting sun. West. Towards the going down of the sun, towards the sunset. Okay, so I thought there were some translations that had understood that as a place name, but I guess my memory is not correct. Let's see if there's any of these that translates that as a place name. Beyond the Western Road. Ooh, I like that one. Derech Mavo HaShemesh. Interesting. Way at the setting sun. Westward in the land of Canaan. I don't particularly like that translation. West of the road. So Derech Mavo HaShemesh, so they translate that as west of the road. Behind the way that goeth to the setting of the sun. So that's a much more kind of literal word-for-word translation. Let's see what the JPS does with that. Behind the way of the going down of the sun. Okay. Actually, I like this translation the best. Where was that? The Western Road. Let's find this for a second. There we go. So let's see if there are any other ones that translated that way. Okay, so beyond the Western Road. Yeah, that's a good translation. I like that one, actually. Robert Alter translates that beyond the sunset way. That's pretty cool, too. Okay, so Mavo HaShemesh, is the sunset. So the Shemesh Yotzei v'Yoshemesh Ba. That's the way that sunrise and sunset are described in the Torah. So Shemesh Yotzei, the sun comes out, and Shemesh Ba, the sun comes, or the sun comes in. Right? That's the usual phraseology that's meant. So when it says Derech Mavo Hashemesh is the coming in of the sun or the setting of the sun. Okay. So derech is way or road, and acharei is after or behind. Okay. So halo hema be'ever yaden acharei derech mavo hashemesh. So maybe actually Robert Alter's translation is the best now that I think about it. So he translates it as behind the sunset way. Behind the sunset way. Beyond the sunset way. That's even better. Beyond the sunset way. So, and once again, we saw this Home Standard Bible, what the heck that is, beyond road. Sunset way, Western road. Western road is the way it's translated by this translation. Robert Alter does it as sunset way. I like sunset way, actually. I think it's the most accurate. It kind of takes into account everything. Let's see if there's a comment on that. The sunset way, that is the westward way. So he actually says the west way, road leading from Transjordan westward into Canaan. I like his sunset way, actually, because it kind of takes that into account. It doesn't just say to the west. The west often in the Torah is in Hebrew is Yama, towards the sea. In other words, towards the Mediterranean Sea. But this time he does it. So let's say the sunset strip. So beyond the sunset strip maybe would be a good way to translate it. Okay. Alrighty. So okay, hello. So let me just even say, no, I'll worry about that another time. Eretz Kena'ani ayoshev be'arava. So in the land of the Canaanites. Oops, we're over here. Hello, Hema be'ever Yarden acharei derech mavo hashemesh be'eretz haKena'ani ayoshev be'arava mul hagilgal itzel elone more. So we're given a place for this. So beyond this sunset strip, in the land of the Canaanites, who dwell in the Arava, is usually translated as the desert or the wilderness, the plain. Mul HaGilgal, so across from Gilgal. Gilgal is a place. That's the first place that is basically where the Israelites land when they enter the land of Israel. Again, we see that in the book of Joshua. Okay. Itzel Elone More. So Elone More, we've seen this place before. Elone More is mentioned in, let me see if I can find the place. Okay, let's do it this way. There it is. Let me just see. Okay, so here we go in Genesis 12, 6. So we see, I'll just do it in the English to make it go quickly, okay? So Abraham is coming from Haran, okay? The city in Aram Naharaim, in Aram of the two rivers. So he took his wife, his nephew Lot, and all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there Avram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. So there it is, Elonei HaMoreh in Shechem. So that was basically Abraham's first landing point in the land, or his first stopping point in the land. I guess it's kind of interesting that Abraham, well, they're not exactly the same place. Gilgal is not exactly the same place as Elonei HaMoreh, but it's not that far. So I don't know, is that some kind of coincidence? Mul HaGilgal, so across from Gilgal, it's Elonei HaMoreh. Elonei HaMoreh. Let me just see if this comes up any other time. Let me see all of that. A second. So if Elonei Mamre, then we have Elonei Moreh. It's our one right here. That's our verse right here. Okay. That's one thing. Now, what is Elonei Mamre? Let's go look at that for a second. That's in Genesis 13:18. Let's go to the English again just for a second. So we have Elonei Moreh, we have Elonei Mamre. Where was that? 13:18. Right. So Elonei Mamre. So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron. So Elonei Mamre is near Hebron. Elonei Moreh is near Shechem. Right. Let me just see if there's anything else I want to say about this. So we have in Genesis 18:1. Right. So this is still Abraham, and here are the three visitors who are coming to say that he's going to have a child. Right. So that's still Elonei Mamre. So just to keep that in mind, to distinguish between Elonei Moreh and Elonei Mamre. Elonei Moreh is up by Shechem. Okay. And Elonei Mamre is by Hebron. Okay. Verse 31. כי אתם עוברים את הירדן לבוא לרשת את הארץ אשר יחווה אלוהיכם נותן לכם וירשתם אותה וישבתם בה. One second. Right. ושמרתם, verse 32, שמרתם לעשות את כל החוקים ואת המשפטים אשר אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום. One second here. נותן לכם ישתם אותה וישבתם בה, שמרתם לעשות את כל החוקים ואת המשפטים אשר אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום. Okay, so that's kind of introductory stuff, right? Now we get down to some of the nitty gritty here. So, אלה החוקים והמשפטים אשר תשמרון לעשות בארץ אשר נתן יחווה אלוהי אבותיך לך לרשתה כל הימים אשר אתם חיים על האדמה. Okay. As I've mentioned before, Chukim and Mishpatim, I don't think there's really a distinction between Chukim and Mishpatim. I've noticed there was another commentator who mentioned the same thing. I don't remember exactly where it was. These are just what the Torah often does. It will often just kind of not kind of, it will often use synonyms or words that are close in meaning for emphasis. Sometimes it'll use the same word and repeat it, and sometimes it'll use similar words and repeat them, and it kind of has the effect of making emphasis or making the how should we say, covering all the bases, maybe, so to speak, right? It would be an example. I want you to go to the refrigerator and I want you to get all the fruits and all the vegetables and bring them here, right? I could have just said, well, maybe that's a good example. Get all the fruits and all the vegetables and all the drinks and bring them here, right? I could have said, just get all the stuff we need for lunch and bring them here, or something like that. I don't know. It's not the best example, but I hope the point is made. That by saying that, I'm kind of emphasizing, right? I'm kind of laying it out. I'm extending it and laying it out and giving a number of synonyms to kind of emphasize the scope of it, or maybe the importance of it. Okay, so it's kind of an emphasis done through synonyms. Okay. אלא החוקים והמשפטים אשר תשמרום לעשות בארץ אשר נתן יהוה אלוהי אבותיך לך לרשתה כל הימים אשר אתם חיים על האדמה. So here we go. Here's some laws, okay? Once you enter the land. So the first thing, and maybe the most important thing, is abed תעבדון את כל המקומות אשר עבדו שם הגויים אשר אתם יורשים אותם את אלוהיהם על הרים הרמים ועל הגבעות ותחת כל עץ רענן. Okay, so one second. הבית תעבדון את כל המקומות אשר עבדו שם הגויים אשר אתם יורשים אותם. So again, we have something that's very typical here in the Torah. Okay, so abed ta'abdun means, again, here we have emphasis. First of all, that's a repetition of the same root, the same word, essentially. Okay, so that's emphasis. You must, okay, certainly, most certainly, okay, destroy all of the places. Oops, my battery's about to go. All of the places asher avdu shama goyim. So all the places where the people, the goyim, the people worshipped, okay? And then we have an intermediate phrase, but really it continues here where they worshipped what? Et Elohim, okay, where they worshipped their gods, okay? So we have, as we've seen many times before, if you've done studies with me before, we have a phrase that intervenes between two phrases that really should be together. So really, if we were thinking in English, okay, certainly destroy, or most definitely destroy, all of the places where the nations worshipped their gods on the high mountains, on the hills, and under every shady or refreshing tree, right? But in between that, we have this other thing, asher atem yorshim otam, okay? So translating it, it's certainly destroy all of the places where the nations worshipped, which you are inheriting them, and then their gods. So you see, there's an intervening phrase, it's asher atem yorshim otam, which you are inheriting, okay? And this is very common in the Torah. We've seen it many times before, and I'm just pointing it out again. Okay. Verse 3. ניתתם את מזבחותם ושיברתם את מצבותם ואשריהם תשרפון באש ופסילי אלוהים תעדעון. So we're talking about complete, I mean, we're not allowed to use the word genocide today, but this is what it's talking about. These places are supposed to be completely destroyed. I mean, everything, the people, everything, every memory of their existence in this land is supposed to be completely eradicated from the land because they are idol worshippers. And Yahweh gave them a lot of time, right? God came to Abraham and said, "You're going to go. Your descendants are going to live in Egypt for 400 years." Actually, it counts from when he says that to when they return, more or less. But so he's giving them many time to repent because the sin of the Amorites is not yet complete, right? But they continued in their evil ways, and God finally says this is just too evil, and we'll get into some of the details there. Okay, at any rate, so nitatztem. So basically, well, be a good translation for that. Tates means like to break into pieces their altars, shibatim et matzevotam, and destroy their pillars, break their pillars, sacred pillars, asherehem tisrafun ba'esh, and their asheras. And ashera is a tree. It was basically a female fertility symbol made out of usually a tree or a tree trunk. Okay, burn that in the fire. So that if it says burn it in the fire, that gives us a hint that we're talking about wood here, right? Okay. Pisile Elohem tigadeun. You shall cut down. I think gada means so that would imply, if this is cut down, this would imply that these pisilim, okay, which are translated usually as carved images, are really made of wood. And we saw something last week, I think it was last week's parsha, which implies the same thing, that it said, burn their pisilim, burn their pisil, okay, their pisilim in fire, and don't covet the gold and the silver. So the implication was that the gold and the silver, these are wooden idols that are plated with gold and silver. So you burn them in the fire, and you do not take the gold and silver for yourself. Okay, let's just see. I'm just curious to see if we can get any more details. Oops, that's what I meant to do. And I'm going to take a break for 1 second just to plug in. So my battery's about dead. So an idol, an image. Let's see if anything mentions wood. So here it's a stone or metal. So here we have of wood. So with saraf, right? So here that's going to be in, I think that's Isaiah. And also, right, so they mention it here with Gada. This is our verse right here, Deuteronomy 12:3. Right? And with Gada, so Gada means to cut down, so that also implies wood, right? Right. So Saraf appears in Isaiah 10:10. I don't think we're going to go check it out right now. But we also saw it last week. I'm just trying to see where else it might be. 1 second here. Here it is. That was Deuteronomy. That was in Deuteronomy 7, right? Okay? We'll even take a look at that for 1 second. But I have to take a break for just a second. Blessings, Luis Gonzalez. Okay, I have to take a break for just 1 second because I have to plug in. So I'm just going to, I won't put on any music or anything like that, but it's about to go dead. So let me just leave this on. Be right back. Okay, just give me a second to plug in here. Okay, we're plugged in now, just in the nick of time. All right, let me get rid of this. So, right. So we go back to Deuteronomy 7. Let's take a look at that for a second. Just take a look at the chapter. It's Deuteronomy 7:5. And we have here ki'im. Ki'im. It's basically the same, exactly the same thing, right? As we're seeing here, right? Here we have mizbechotam. I'm sorry, nitatztem et mizbechotam, and here we have titotzu matzevotam. So there, it's the matzeva that is. We do titotzu v'tishaberu. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to get that far down to it. At any rate, we have upisilehem tisrafun be'esh. Okay, and they're carved idols. You shall burn in the fire. So that implies they're made out of wood, right? If you take a stone and burn in the fire, well, it can get charred, but it's not going to get destroyed, right? And then we have it again in, I think this is the one I really want to see, 725. 725. Right. So 725 says, Upisile Elohehem, the carved images or the carved idols of their gods, Tisrafun be'esh, burn in the fire. Lo tahmod kesev v'zahav alehem. Do not covet the silver and the gold that is upon them, right? And this, I think, here this literally means upon them. I mean, it's wooden carved images that are plated or that are covered with gold and silver. And as I pointed out last week, we certainly have precedents for this because many of the items in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan, are exactly the same thing. So, for instance, what would be an example? Well, the ark covers pure gold, but I think the ark itself, now I have to remember. Yes, I believe the ark itself is made out of acacia wood, right? And then it's plated in gold, right? So there's a precedence for even back then for various religious objects, lahavdil, to be made of wood and then plated in either silver or gold. There are other things that are plated in silver, and then there are things that are plated in copper, like the altar is plated in copper, the main altar. Okay, so v'zahav alehem. Okay, so do not covet the silver and the gold that is upon them. And take it for yourself. Pin tivakesh bo. Okay, that's from mokesh. Lest you get caught up in it, lest you get trapped by it. Okay, because this is an abomination to Yahweh, your God. Okay, so we see here an interesting. So carved idols. We see in a number of places it implies that they are made out of wood, right? If we had more time, we could go through the whole thing. Here in the Strong's, let me close out some of these tabs, by the way. So the Strong's here for Psil, right? And Isaiah, Stoner Metal, and Micah 1:7. Let's look at that for 1 second, just out of curiosity. Oops, do this Hebrew. So Micah 1:7 says, "V'chol pisileha." Okay, we'll go back one verse. Samti shomron elai hasadeh. So I will make Shomron. Shomron was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. Le'i hasadeh is usually like ruins. Heap, they translate it as heap of ruins. Hasadeh in the field, le mata'e karem, to the turn it into a planting place for vineyards. Ve higarti lagai avaneha and I will, higarti, lahager in modern Hebrew means to emigrate. But it basically means to change place, right? Let's see how they translate it here. Pour down, okay? Basically means I'll cast away, lagai, I will take its stones, the stones of the Shomron. Remember, everything in those days was pretty much made of stone. The houses were made of stone. Everything was made of stone. That's why we're able to find them even today, right? Biblical archaeology. And I will cast them down into the valley. Its stones, the stones of the Shomron, and its very foundations I will lay bare. Okay? So this is a curse against the Shomron. V'chol pisileha, and all of its carved images, yukatu, shall be cut down. Lachot is to cut down. Okay? I'm sorry. Yukatu is lakot is to beat. Right? They beat your they shall beat their swords into plowshares. Right? So they will be beaten. Yukatu, like katit, like shemen katit. Okay? Bechol it naneha yisrafu be'esh. Well, this is V'chol atzabeha asim shmama. Okay, so this is really important thing. So the important thing is here, they're going to be beaten. Okay, so that would imply you could take metal, right? You can't burn metal in fire. I mean, you can, but you have to have very hot fire, and then maybe you can melt it down. But here, it's being beaten. You can't do that to wood. You can only do that to silver and gold, to metal, right? So this is implying here, these drawings, I guess, from there is implying that we're talking about stone or metal. What's a stone or metal? I'm not sure what stone. I guess stone is just crushed or just turned into little pebbles or something like that. Okay. At any rate, here we have sheathed with silver in Isaiah 30:22. Let's take a look at that for 1 second. Yeah, here we go. That's exactly what we're looking for to kind of prove the point. Okay. ותימתם את ציפוי פסלי כספך ואת עפודת מסכת זהבך תזרם כמו דעዋ צא תאמר לא. Okay. So we have tzipui, the covering of pisile kaspecha. So the coverings of the idols in silver. Okay. Vet afudat. So afudat is like an ephod, right? Here they translate as ornament of the molten images of gold. Anyway, let's not get bogged down too much. So we're talking here the covering of the graven images of silver and the ornaments of the molten images of gold. Okay. So it's unclear. Are we talking about the images are the statues are made out of silver, or the covering is made out of silver? Not really clear. Okay, it's for another time. At any rate, the point is that these carved idols that are be spoken here, let me close all of these out, and we'll get back to our verses here. The point is that here, right, it seems to be implying, if you want to say cut down, gada, let's just look at gada for a second. Okay, so they translate it here, the BDB translated is to hew down, right? Oops, there it is. Okay. Chop off, basically. Right, so that would imply, it seems to me, although it would require further study, that would imply that when we're talking about this basil here, that they're made out of wood. Okay, anyway, let's move on. And you will completely wipe out, you will eradicate, that's what it says here, you will eradicate their names from this place. So there is to be not even a memory left of these people in the land of Canaan. There's to be completely eradicated off the land, so much so that there's not even a trace of them, right? Because they're idol worshippers, right? Okay. Okay, lo ta'asun ken le Yahweh Elohechem. You shall not do so to your God. Not do what? Okay, well, we have here a phrase. We go up a bit. Let's find it. Et kol hamikomot asher avdu sham hagoyim asher atem yorshim otam et Elohem al ha'arim haramim ve'al ha'givaot v'tachat kol. So this is what the I don't want to use the word goyim because it's such a loaded, even though it just means nations. This is what these nations did, right? All of the places, okay, where these nations worship their gods on the high mountains and on the hills and under every shady tree, right? So you will not do so to your God in verse 4, right? You will not do what? You will not do this. I can't highlight. Let's see. Can I highlight both at the same time? No. 1 second. Let's try this again. Okay, so this. No, not working. One more time. Shift. No, it's not doing. All right, I'll highlight them both, right? So this in verse 4, Lo ta'asun ken li Yahweh Elohechem, you shall not do this to your God. What? You shall not do what it says in verse 2. Worship, we're not to worship our God like these nations worship their God in many different places on the tops of all the hills and mountains and under trees, etc., etc. So again, this causes a lot of confusion because the modifying or the verse that this is speaking about is all the way back here, is verse 2. Okay, don't do so to your God. Don't do what to your God? This. Worship him in a bunch of different places. But in between that, then we have verses 3 and 4. I'm sorry, verse 3, which says destroy their altars. Okay, so lo tasun, don't do so to your God, right? You would think maybe it's saying don't do what? Well, the previous verse was about destroying their idols. How can you? But that doesn't make sense. How can you destroy the idols of your God? How can you destroy the why would you want to destroy the altars of your own God, right? So it's not referring to verse 8, back to verse 2. And again, very typical, as I've pointed out many times, in the Torah, you can have intervening verses between two verses which are modifying each other, or between, in this case, two verses which are relating to each other. So verse 4 here is relating back to verse 2, okay? This caused a lot of confusion, especially among the rabbis, whether they just didn't know or whether they're just trying to use this fact. I think it's really much later, like Rashi and people like that. They come to all kinds of strange conclusions because in the Western way of thinking, you can't have something modifying something else unless it's kind of juxtaposed. You wouldn't say, if I were to say to you in English something like, looking at the fireplace here, go clean the fireplace, which 5 days ago we cooked a wonderful bubbling stew in it, and then we ate it after inviting friends over and had a wonderful time with the broom. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You think I'm talking about clean the bubbling stew with the broom, but really what I mean is clean the fireplace with the broom. Obviously, right from the context from what I'm saying, that could be understood, and that makes little sense. It's very confusing to the modern Western or English-speaking and Romance language-speaking mind. But this is exactly what the Torah does again and again and again. It will interrupt two things which belong together with sometimes a word, a phrase, a sentence, a number of sentences, a paragraph, sometimes even a number of paragraphs, and then it will come back and modify the thing that it was originally talking about. And that's exactly what we see here. Okay? All right. Let's go on to verse 5. כי אם אל המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך מכל שבטיכם, לשום את שמו שם, לשכנו תדרשו ובאת שמה. Okay? Okay. One second here. I just want to see one thing. So this is 12:5. Let's see how he deals with one thing. So he says, "You shall seek it." So he's talking about the place, not to. See, I would interpret this as okay. At any rate, it doesn't matter. So you don't worship in a bunch of different places. There's one centralized location, okay? Asher yivchar Yahweh, which God will choose, okay? And this is actually not the case at first, right? We see in the Tanakh instances of sacrifices happening in many different places. When is this place chosen? This place is chosen. Let's find it here. So this is basically where the place is chosen. Okay? At the end of 2 Samuel. Let's see if we can find the exact verse. So we have the story of David doing a census. God gets mad because you're not supposed to count the Israelites why? Because it shows a lack of faith in God, right? It shouldn't matter how many Israelites you have. If you count them, then it's saying I don't have faith that God is going to bring me victory, right? I'm worried I don't have enough men, but it doesn't matter, right? Victory doesn't come from the amount of men you have, right? Victory comes from God, right? That's why, for instance, Gideon had to reduce the amount of men he had to only 300. Okay. At any rate, so that's bad. So David performs a census. Okay. And we'll pick it up here. I'll just do it in the English to make it go a little bit quicker. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel as punishment for David's census. From the morning until the end of the time designated, and 70,000 people from Dan to Beersheba died. When the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, okay. So David had already conquered Jerusalem at this point, right? Let's just see. Where did David conquer Jerusalem? That was with Joab when they took over the. Okay. At any rate, I won't find it now. The Lord relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, "Enough! Withdraw your hand." The angel of the Lord was at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Okay, so this threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. This is exactly what's going to end up being the Temple Mount, basically. Okay. When David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, "I have sinned. I, the shepherd, have done wrong, but these are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family." Okay. On that day, God went to David and said to him, "Go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite." So David went up as the Lord commanded through God. When Araunah looked and saw the king and his officials coming towards him, he went out and bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, "Why has my Lord come to his servant to buy your threshing floor?" David answered, "So I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped." Araunah said to David, "Let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering. Here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty." Araunah gives all this to the king. Araunah also said to him, "May the Lord your God accept you." But the king replied to Araunah, first of all, let's get the name in Hebrew. just so we can see it. So this is it in Hebrew, right? It's written as Arania, but it's read here, right here, oops, as Aravna or Arauna or Arauna, not Aravna for sure, right? So I guess Arauna exactly is the same, or Arauna, Arauna, I guess would be the right way. Okay, the Jebusite. Okay, here it is again. Okay, Arauna. Okay, so David bought the threshing floor of Arauna and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered his prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. Okay, so this place, at the end of 2 Samuel, this place is what becomes the altar to God. Okay, and I'm trying to remember. It says it explicitly. Let me just see here. So this is the end of 2 Samuel. Let me just check one thing. Alrighty. Okay. One second. All right. Here we go. So this is what Robert Alter says. So the Lord's messenger was at this. Oops. Oopsie. Let's go back to there. Okay. So the Lord's messenger was at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. In this fashion, the last-minute averting of the destruction of Jerusalem is linked with the etiological means exploring the source of or the origin of, tale explaining how the site of the future temple was acquired. While the temple is not explicitly mentioned, this acquisition of an altar site in Jerusalem is clearly placed here to prepare the way for the story of Solomon, the temple builder that is to follow. Thus, the first sacrifice offered on the spot is associated with a legendary turning away of wrath from Jerusalem, a token of the future function of the temple. The name Araunah is not Semitic and is generally thought to be Hittite or Hurrian. Some scholars claim it is not a title. It is a title, not a name. And in any event, Araunah's presence indicates that the conquered Jebusites were not massacred or entirely banished, but continued to live in Jerusalem under David as his subjects. Okay, so there we go. Let's see if there's anything else. One second. Okay, that's it. There's nothing else we need to see here. Okay, so that's the idea. So getting back to our verse here. Okay, so Ima makom asher yivhar Yahweh. Okay, the place which Yahweh will choose. Where does he do this? Apparently, he does it right here. Right. This is he does it at the end of 2 Samuel, when David builds an altar to turn back the plague before the angel of God is to destroy Jerusalem, right? And this place becomes the place that is chosen. So after that, then we go on to First Kings, and David dies, and then Solomon takes over. Okay, now let's just see one more thing. So Ana Una only appears here in the last chapter of 2 Samuel. So my question is, and I'm trying to remember, is there any place where explicitly it says that the temple is going to be built on this threshing floor of Ana Una? It seems that way, right? And Robert Alter seems to imply that it's not explicit, but I'm wondering if there's any other place where it's mentioned. We'd have to go to the story of when Solomon actually builds the temple, but I'm not going to do that now. So just something I know. All right, let's go back to here. Our verses. Okay, so until this place is chosen, then really it kind of still is somewhat of a free-for-all, and we see that, right? The temple is not built until the time of Solomon. Before that, we see that sacrifices are taking place in many many different places. Okay. Okay. Ki'im el makom asher yichar Yahweh Elohecha mikol shivtechem lasum et shemo sham yishechno tidrashu ubata shama. Okay, so you're going to seek out that place, and you'll come there. Verse 6. Ve'vetem shama olotechem wa zivchechem wa et ma'asrotechem wa et trumat yitchem wa nidrechem wa niditechem wa bechorot bikarchem wetzonchem. Basically, anything that's an official, gift to God is to be brought there. Okay, and if you remember back in the beginning of Leviticus, we studied all the different types of one second. Right. So Eitan Avior points out that when the census is taken, that the half shekel is supposed to be paid. So the reason for that half shekel being paid, right, is that you're not supposed to take a census. So that's supposed to be atonement, or that's supposed to be protection against taking the census. But that census was ordained by God, the one back in Exodus. So then Eitan Elvior mentions no mention of the ransom being paid. I think that's why Hashem was upset. No, I don't think that's what's going on there. Okay, I think what's going on is, if we go back to Exodus 30, we'll see that census was. Hold on one second. Excuse me for 1 second. Why is it? Just check on her every 5 minutes or so. Go through it. Okay. All right. Sorry about that distraction. So no, I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't want to go back there because we'll just get too off track. But what was going on there is the census was sanctioned by God, right? But then God said, because I'm asking you to take a census, there has to be some kind of atonement, because taking a census of Israelites is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. So in order that some kind of bad thing, and so in order that some kind of plague doesn't strike you, you're going to give a half shekel to basically to the tabernacle, or to the tabernacle, shall we say, to the treasury, as an atonement. Okay, so that's what was going on here. Here there was not even a census sanctioned at all in the end of 2 Samuel. This was David just decided to do it completely on his own. So it's not like you can just decide to do it on your own and then give a half shekel to make up for it. Okay, you're just not supposed to do it. And the reason, as far as I understand, is that you're not supposed to do it. Once again, is it shows a lack of faith in God. We see that story in Gidon. Gidon is worried that he doesn't have enough men, and God says, no, actually you have too many men, and he cuts them down. You have the whole story where the men he asks the men to drink water, and only those that lay down and lapped the water like a dog, it says, they were chosen to be in the army. So the army was cut down to only 300. Why? To show that it doesn't matter. It's lo besus velo berechev ele by the hand of God is what produces victory, right? Not the strength of an army. And that's exactly why we're not supposed to, as far as I understand, we're not supposed to take censuses of the people of Israel when we go out to war, because it shows a lack of faith in God. It shows that we think we're doing it, right? I'm sorry. Right? That my own hands have done this, when in fact God is trying to teach us the lesson that no, that even one can chase 100 and five can chase 100. What was it again? What are the numbers? One can chase 100 and five can chase 1,000, right? Is that it? I'm trying to remember now. One can chase 100 and five can chase 1,000. I think that's right. Okay, so and that's the lesson we're supposed to learn. Okay, all right. And then Eitan again says Goy means nations. That's exactly right. Right? There's no in the Tanakh, the word goy does not have a negative connotation. In fact, Israel is called a goy. Goy just means a nation, right? And we saw that in, for instance, let's look at Deuteronomy 4, chapter 4, verse 6. Okay. There's yeah, there we go, 7, right? So verse 7, this is Deuteronomy 4:7. Ki mi goy gadol asher lo Elohim krovim elav ki Yahweh Eloheinu bechol karenu elav, right? So no, that's not. Maybe that doesn't prove the point. Here we go. This proves the point. That's what I was looking for. Verse 6, right? One of my favorite verses. I knew it was in there. Shematem asitem, you shall keep and do the commandments of God. Ki hi chochmatchem v'binatchem l'einei ha'amim, because this is your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the nations. In other words, they will see you as a wise. Well, it says here, asher yishma'un et kol hachukim ha'ele. They will hear of all these statutes, ve'amru rak am chacham v'nagom, that this is certainly a wise and understanding people, Hagoy Hagadol Hazed, this great nation. Okay, and here the word that's used specifically referring to Israel is goy, right? So the word goy, unlike the current colloquial connotation, doesn't have any negative connotation. It just means a people. Okay. Alrighty, let's go back to where we were. So we are in Deuteronomy 7. Let me close this out. So you're only supposed to go to this one place, right? That's it. That's the difference between us and the nations that are to be destroyed. They had many gods, and they had many places of worship, right? We have one God, and we have one place of worship. And this centralization of worship is really meant to emphasize that point, right? There's one nation, there's one God, one nation, indivisible under God, right? The idea is that there is complete centralization of the cultic worship of our God, so that we don't fall back, or we don't, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't lapse into idol worship, right? Because if there are many places, then there's no centralized control over it, right? Maybe someone's going to start worshiping this God, someone's going to start worshiping that God, right? with a one place with one centralized worship, and it being such a serious thing, and it's repeated a bunch of times here, we see that this is one of the mechanisms that keeps us worshiping only only our God. Okay. And maybe it's also polemic, right? Maybe it's not just a mechanism. Maybe it's also polemic. One God, one place to worship, right? It's showing that you can't, that it is only one place. That is in line with the idea of there being only one God. Okay. Verse 8, Lo asun kechol asher anachnu asim po hayom ish kol hayashar be'enao. Okay. So don't do what we're doing here. Here, everyone does what is right in their eyes, meaning, I guess, they just sacrifice pretty much everywhere, even though there's already a tabernacle set up, right? In the desert, there is a tabernacle set up with an altar, okay? So I've never really, one of these days I have to do for myself a thorough study of what is meant by all of this, right? Because we do already have a centralized place of worship. There is an altar set up, right? But it seems from my understanding that this idea of until this place is chosen, right? There's a special place that's going to be chosen. Until then there's some flexibility or some leeway. We do see a number of people, including righteous people in the Tanakh, who worship outside of the tabernacle, right? They sacrifice to God outside of the place where the tabernacle was. Okay, so it really requires kind of a very deep, detailed study and to understand exactly. So the way I understand it is that until that place is chosen, then there is some leeway, some flexibility, right? It's not completely outlawed to bring a sacrifice outside of a place. But once that place is chosen, once Solomon decides to build a temple and God chooses that place, Yahweh chooses that place, then that's it. There's no Adata el haminucha wa el hanachala asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach. Because you've not yet, you can read along with the translation. I'm just going to comment. I'm not going to translate word for word, right? So you're doing whatever you want because you haven't come into the land, okay? You're wandering around, okay? So I can't choose a place yet, right? So you're doing whatever you want. You're sacrificing all over the place, okay? ועברתם את ירדן וישבתם בארץ אשר יהוה אלוהיכם מנחיל אתכם והניח לכם מכל אויביכם מסביב וישבתם בטח. So when ועברתם, when you cross the Jordan, and this I will translate word for word, and you dwell in the land and you settle in the land which Yahweh your God bequeaths to you, and he gives you rest from all of your enemies misaviv around, and you are dwelling securely. Okay, so only then what? בוא לשכן שמו שם, שם תביאו את כל אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם, עולותיכם וזבחיכם, מעשרותיכם ותרומת ידכם וכל מבחר נדריכם אשר תדרו ליהוה. Okay, so when that happens, when you're settled in the land, okay, don't worry about it right now, but when you're settled in the land, God says, then God will choose a place, and that's when you have to start bringing all of your stuff to that place only. Okay, so before you're settled, you don't have to do it. And we actually see, of course, that the Mishkan travels to a number of different places, right? For instance, Shiloh is one of the famous places. Okay. שמחתם לפני יהוה אלוהיכם אתם ובניכם ובנותיכם ועבדיכם ועמותיכם אמהותיכם והלוי אשר בשעריכם כי אין לו חלק ונחלה איתכם. Okay, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh your God. Okay, you, your son, your daughter, your servants, your manservants, your male servants, your female servants, and the Levite, because the Levite has no portion in the land, right? So, so this idea of going to the temple, okay, um, is filled with rejoicing, right? You bring your sacrifices there, and you rejoice. Of course, we know that if we look in, let's find it. One second. One second. One second. Huh, I can't find it now. Where is that? Here it is. So Leviticus 23, verse 40. This is speaking about the holiday of Sukkot. V'lekachtem lechem b'yom harishon pri eitz hadar, okay, a fruit of the goodly tree, kapot tamarim, ve'anaf eitz avot, ve'arave nachal, so the four species, v'samachtem lifnei Yahweh Elohechem shivat yamim, okay, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh Elohechem for 7 days, okay. So this is the same phrase, okay. Here we have samachtem lifnei Yahweh Elohechem shivat yamim. Here we have samachtem lifnei Yahweh Elohechem. It's exactly the same phrase, word for word, right? So we have here in the case of Sukkot, we know that this is one of the three holidays, right? Chag Amatzot, for the Passover sacrifice, Chag Shvot, and Chag Sukkot, that we are required. They're pilgrimage holidays. We're required to come up to the tabernacle, to the temple, right? And so it says here regarding Sukkot that you will take these four species and you will rejoice before Yahweh, your God, for 7 days, right? So why you're rejoicing, right? So how do the rabbis first of all interpret that? They think you take the four species and you dance around, you do the funky chicken, as I like to say, right? Around the altar in the synagogue, or back then they did it around the courtyard, right? So but this is a general phrase. This samachtem lifnei Yahweh Elohechem is a general phrase for what happens when you come up to the Temple Mount, when you come to Jerusalem, or what eventually will be chosen as Jerusalem, right? So when you come to the place that God will choose, right? Samachtem lifnei Yahweh Elohechem. This is when you will rejoice before your God, right? So this whole idea of coming up to God is it's supposed to be a time of rejoicing, right? So this kind of debunks to a certain degree this idea that the happiness is this is kind of a polemic against the rabbi's idea that the happiness comes from taking the four species and dancing around, although it's not a direct contradiction. But the point I'm trying to make is that the idea is not necessarily related to having the four species, okay? That the idea is that when it says samachtem lifnei Yahweh Elohechem, we see here from Deuteronomy 12 that this is related to going up to the temple, going up to, we'll say Jerusalem, because that's the place that was later chosen, going up to visit God in Jerusalem, okay? That's when that's a cause for rejoicing, and so you rejoice before Yahweh, your God, okay? And it's not necessarily related to the four species. So this would imply that the four species are not necessary to rejoice before God, and therefore it frees those four species to be used for other things, such as building the Sukkot, such as building the Sukkah, which is what Karaites in general tend to believe. Okay, so all right. And here it's interesting that it says you, your sons, your daughters, okay, your manservants, your maidservants, okay, and the Levite. These are all again, besides you. This is all one. These are all kind of downtrodden classes, or classes that need help, right? Your son and your daughter, okay, they're not fully independent adults yet, all right, so they need your aid and assistance. The manservant, the male servant, and the female servant also, right? They even they, they need your assistance. They're not a high class in society. And the Levite also the same thing. Why? Okay, so if he lives among you, if the Levites did not get a land inheritance like the other 12 tribes did, right? So there are a total of 13 tribes, really, because Joseph split into two, Manasseh and Ephraim, okay? But there are only 12 land inheritances because the Levites do not get a land inheritance, okay? So they have their own Levitical cities, okay? But besides that, they may live among you, right? They may scatter among Israel, right? That's exactly the a prophecy, or shall we say, the blessing or curse that that Jacob gave to his son Levi on Jacob's deathbed. Okay, that will be scattered among Israel. Okay, Shimon and Levi, but in the end it was Levi that was scattered among Israel. But they also got the priesthood, and they also got the assistants, the assistant positions to the priesthood. Okay, so, but this reminds me, of course, of the statement in Exodus 20 regarding the Shabbat. Okay, so here's the verses regarding the Shabbat, and what does it say here? Okay, it says, so keep the Shabbat. Okay, 6 days do your work. On the seventh day rest. Okay, and who is supposed to rest? Okay, okay, it's a similar list. It's not exactly the same list. These are the ones who must rest on the Shabbat. So it's you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your male servant, your female servant, okay, your animals, and the ger, and the sojourner, the quote unquote convert, okay, who comes to live among you. Asher b'sharecha, okay. Let's compare this here to Deuteronomy, the list, okay. So, who are the ones who are supposed to rejoice before God when they go up to Jerusalem? Okay. You, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant. So far, it's exactly the same as Exodus 20. Okay. Same words, exactly. This is in the singular. In Deuteronomy, it's in plural. Now we have some divergence. So here, after those four, now we have the Levi that is in Yesharechem. Okay, well, we don't have the animal mentioned here because obviously the animal's not going to go up and start rejoicing before God, right? The animals don't have that kind of awareness to say, "Oh, wow, I'm here in the temple of God. Let me start being happy," right? So that's left out. But here, in Exodus 20, when it speaks about the list regarding Shabbat, it's the ger, which is in your gates. Here, it's not the ger, it's the Levi. Okay, so we have a logical reason so the first four are the same, or the first five actually. You, your son, your daughter, your female servant, your female servant. Animal is left out of the rejoicing in Jerusalem for obvious reasons. Animals can't rejoice. They may be satisfied and content, but they can't rejoice, right? And then the last one in Exodus 20, Ger Chasher B'Sharecha is replaced. I won't say replaced, but in its place here, we have Halewi Asher B'Sharechem. Okay, everything here is in the plural, so it's Sharechem rather than Sharecha. But isn't that interesting? Now it's talking about the Levite that is in your gates, right? So the Ger and the Levite is certainly not the same thing. It goes without saying, right? The Ger is from a foreign nation. The Levite is one of the tribes of Israel. But it's very interesting that we're talking about people that are scattered. Okay, in both cases, it's speaking about people that are scattered among Israel for one reason or another. The Levite is scattered among Israel because, well, that was the fulfillment of what Jacob had said, and also because they have the priesthood and the Levitical cities, etc. And the Ger is scattered among Israel. Why? Because they don't have any land inheritance, just like the Levites. Well, they are like the Levites, right? So we can even see this phrase where it says "asher b'sharecha," okay? That this would imply that whoever is "asher b'sharecha," whoever has this phrase applied to them in your gates, is someone who doesn't have their own land inheritance. Here, the Ger does not have a land inheritance. Here, the Levite does not have a land inheritance, right? Makes sense? Okay, any questions, any comments so far? Does anyone want to say anything? No? Yes? Just give me 1 second, please. So, just curious if maybe, I'm guessing no, but let's see if Robert Alter picks up on this. This is Deuteronomy 12:12. Let's go back to the beginning. Numbers, Deuteronomy 12:12. Okay, so this is what Robert Alter says about this. The Levites, as we are repeatedly reminded, had no tribal territory. As long as the countryside was dotted with local shrines, most Levites had a source of living close to hand, officiating at the local cult and taking their share of the offerings brought by the worshippers. One may infer that the centralization of the cult between the late 8th century, Hezekiah's reform, and the late 7th century, Josiah's reform, created a serious economic problem. Okay, so this is all, I don't know, this is all academic gobbledygook. This is not what I was looking for. But he does add this, the phrase "within your gates" mean wherever you may live, and so refers to Levites out of Jerusalem. Okay, fair enough, right? We see that phrase. We also see that in, well, let's take a look at that. So here's a famous phrase that is that we Karaites bring up all the time. Okay. Second. So verse 8, this is Deuteronomy 17. Ki yipale mincha davar lemishpat ben dam ledam ben din ledin ben nega lenega divrei ribot b'sha'arecha. So if you can't solve a problem within your gates, here we have this phrase again, b'sha'arecha, yukamta wa alita el makom asher yivchar Yahweh Elohecha bo. Right? So we have this. So Robert Alter here points out this contrast. The phrase "within your gates" means wherever you may live, and so refers to Levites outside of Jerusalem. And this seems to be supported by what we see here. If you can't solve a problem in your gates, then you go up, then you arise and go up, make aliyah to the place which Yahweh, your God, has chosen. Right? Again, reference to this place that is going to be this Jerusalem, right? So if you can't solve the problems of B'sha'arecha, then you go and you come to the next for the Kohen, the Levite, or the Shofet, or the judge, and he gives you the answer. Okay? So we have this contrast between Sha'arecha, among all of the dwellings, places of the Israelites, and the place that is going to be chosen, or the place that is chosen. Okay. All right. Verse 13. ישמר לך פן תעלה עולותיך לכל מקום אשר תראה. כי אם במקום אשר יבחר יהוה באחד שבטיך, שם תעלה עולותיך, ושם תעשה כל אשר אנוכי מצווך. Okay, so you go up to that one place. And now we have a contrast. Now this is very important, okay, because this is also going to get into something that is constantly brought up by the Karaites. Rak. So rak means but, okay, or only. Let's see how they officially translate it. Except, howbeit, howsoever, at the least, nevertheless, but, right? So now we have a contrast. Okay, so the zorak implies it's a contrast. Okay, so all of your sacrifices, okay, olotecha, your burnt offerings, your fully burnt offerings, okay, you bring it to, okay, you bring your olotecha to the place that God chooses, okay. And everything else that's commanded regarding the sacrifice, you bring there. But, okay, only, nonetheless, in contrast, okay, what's a good word for it? Howbeit, howsoever, right? L'cholav avat nafshecha tizbach v'chat basar kibirkat Yahweh Elohecha asher natan lecha b'chol she'arecha hatameh v'hatahor Yochlenu kitzvi u'ki'ayal. Okay, so what the heck does this mean? Okay, so in contrast to what? To your olotecha and the other sacrifices that you have to bring, in other words, those that are basically dedicated to God, okay, in contrast to this, you may eat or you may slaughter. Tizbach is a general word meaning slaughter, even though it's sometimes used to imply a sacrifice, but tizbach just means to slaughter, to butcher. Okay? This is slaughter for sacrifice, but it's not for sacrifice. Let's just see. Here, slaughter for eating. Connected also with the sacrifice, as eating of all flesh among ancient Israel was sacrificial. That's not true. This is exactly what this verse is going to say. Okay? So, v'chat basar kibirchat Yahweh. So you can eat meat according to the blessing that Yahweh your God, okay, asher natan lecha b'chol sha'arecha. So according to whatever blessing God gives you, you can eat meat. B'chol sha'arecha. Here we have again this phrase b'chol sha'arecha, meaning you don't have to bring it to Jerusalem. You can eat meat. Okay? Hatameh v'hatahor yochlenu kitzvi u'ki'ayal. Okay? So let's get a good translation for this one. This one's a bit tricky. I want to say it precisely. Okay, let's do Robert Alter's translation for a second. Only whatever your appetite's craving may be, you shall slaughter and eat meat according to the blessing of your Lord your God that he has given you within all your gates. The unclean and the clean shall eat it like the deer or like the gazelle. Okay, so let's examine that a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to read, not here. A second. Well, let's read this comment as well. It looks interesting, even though it's not directly. So the versatile Hebrew nefesh, life, breath, person, and also an intensive form of the personal pronoun, is most plausibly construed here as appetite, since it has in Psalms 107:9. The other problem in understanding this phrase turns on the meaning of the initial particle bi. So what is it saying? So over here, bi chol avat nafshecha, he's talking about. Most translators understand it to refer to the degree of craving, Richard Elliott Friedman, as much as your soul desires, or to the frequency of the craving, whenever you desire. But bi, primary meaning in, is more naturally a locative, and for an indication of degree, one would expect ki, as. The noun phrase itself, awat nefesh, suggests intense appetite, and the instructions that follow have to do chiefly with place, that henceforth the Israelites will be allowed to slaughter and eat meat wherever they happen to be, though sacrificial slaughter can take place only on the central altar. Okay, that's a little bit too technical. I don't want to get into that right now. Okay, you shall slaughter and eat meat. The verbal root Zion bet het. So this is exactly what we're talking about. So this is this root here, right? This is this word here, okay? Tizbach. So as I mentioned earlier, it means slaughter in the context of sacrifice, or just slaughter, butcher for eating, okay? That's exactly what Robert Alter is saying here. To slaughter and to sacrifice, because in ancient religion the two acts were inseparable, but now that sacrifice at local shrines has been abolished, some mechanism must be established to enable the Israelites to eat meat even when they cannot come to the central place of worship. Okay? What follows are innovative regulations for the practice that the rabbis call shchitat hulin, secular slaughter. Okay, so he's saying, so basically what we're talking about here, okay, I'm not sure I agree with him. I don't think in ancient Israel that all sacrifice was slaughtered. I've heard this theory put forth before, but I don't personally agree with it. Okay, only that which was brought as a sacrifice was to be a sacrifice, right? So his reasoning is that now that not everything, or now that you're only supposed to bring on the central altar, now not everything has to be a sacrifice. You can just eat meat for the sake of eating meat. But I think that was always the case, right? The Israelites always ate meat for the sake of eating meat. I mean, let's see, think of an example. Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know. How do you say Slav again in English? Maybe that's a bad example, but I forgot how to say it. Those big birdie thingies. I forgot what you call them in English. Slav, not geese. Something like geese. We'll call them geese for now, okay? When the geese came and the Israelites ate them, that wasn't brought on the altar to sacrifice, okay? Of course, that was before the tabernacle was built. All right, maybe that's not such a great example. At any rate, I disagree with this idea, which I've heard for years, that there was that before these regulations, every slaughter was a sacrifice. Okay, that you just bring it to your local altar, sacrifice it there, and then eat it. Okay, I don't think that's the case at all. This is kind of an academic view, because they believe that Israelites were originally idol worshippers who eventually became monotheists. So there's this progression that you'll hear them speak about from polytheism to monaltry to monotheism, and then to centralized worship. Okay, so polytheism is the worship of many gods. Monaltry is the continued worship of many gods, but the elevation of one specific god, which the academics would believe was Yahweh, to the head of the pantheon. Okay, so he's the head god, like let's say, God forbid, a million times over, Zeus within the Greek pantheon, right? Although that's not monaltry, he was the head god, but I think monaltry implies really that that's almost the only god. There are other gods, but the main god is the one you mostly worship. Then there's monotheism, where you worship only one god, okay? But not necessarily in a centralized location. And then there's monotheism, then there's a centralized location. So basically what the academics believe is that that's the way Israel developed. They were originally polytheists, and then they were monotheists. They practiced monotry, and then they practiced monotheism, but not in a centralized location. And then eventually they practiced monotheism in a centralized location, right? So therefore, the academics would see this as being in that third stage where they're now monotheists, but they're still able to sacrifice anywhere. And so every slaughter of an animal is basically, or an animal for the sake of eating, is a sacrifice. I don't think that was the case at all, because I don't believe that the Israelites followed that stage. They were always monotheists from the time that Abraham decided to follow God to a new land. The Israelites were, at least the good Israelites, the loyal Israelites, were all monotheists, and so therefore, even at this stage, they were already eating meat outside of the context of bringing sacrifice. Okay. So, any comments? Any questions so far? Anyone want to say anything? Yes, no, maybe so. If you do, just let me know. Okay, so, but nonetheless, this is very important. So I will reject Robert Alter's idea, which I've heard a lot, okay, that this is now a concession to the idea that sacrifices can't be brought everywhere, okay? I think this is saying something different. And basically what I think this is saying is that if you are eating meat not in the context of a sacrifice, then you don't have to bring it to Jerusalem. Okay, that's basically what it's saying. Okay, it was always the case that they were eating meat outside of the context of a sacrifice, but this is just clarifying. Okay, that now that we have the central place of worship, that these non-sacrificial eatings of meat don't have to be part of the don't have to be brought to Jerusalem. Okay. So, we were looking at Robert Alter's stuff for a second. Okay. The unclean and the clean shall eat it, like the deer or the gazelle. Okay. Let's take these one at a time. The unclean and the clean shall eat it. In the case of sacrificial meals, only ritually clean are allowed to partake. For secular meals, the restrictions do not apply. Okay, so this is kind of a bit of a confusing verse, because clean and unclean can refer to human beings, right? We're either tahor or tameh, right? And it can also apply to animals. There are tahor animals and there are tameh animals. Tahor meaning quote unquote kosher, tameh meaning unkosher, right? So this can get a bit confusing, but clearly the context here is okay, okay, is the human being, as Robert Alter correctly points out. Okay, whether you're in a state of purity or a state of impurity, you can eat this meat because it's not sacrificial meat. Okay, for sacrificial meat, you must be in a state of purity. Okay, to eat it, to partake in it. Okay, to even come to bring it as a sacrifice. Okay, but if it's just regular meat that you're eating just for your appetite, then you can be either tameh or tahor. Okay, and then okay, so let's read this. Oops. The one category of meat always permitted outside the cult was game, neither deer nor gazelle being among the animals specified for sacrificial use. Now animals otherwise devoted to the cult, sheep, bulls, goats, rams, may be eaten without sacrifice, just as game is eaten. Right, so that's exactly, I agree with that statement. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, we never see a tzvi. Okay, tzvi is usually translated as a deer. Okay, a gazelle, and an ayil let me just see one thing here. Right, so we never see this. Okay, so they're translating the ayil as the deer and the tzvi as the gazelle. So the ayil is never brought, right? We can see here from the concordance that the first time this word appears is actually right here in Deuteronomy 12:15. Okay? In all of the Tanakh, this is the first time it appears. So missing something? Yeah. Let's just see. So, okay, we have our list of animals, which I've been keeping. So let's take a look at that. Okay, wait a second here. Leviticus 9:2. We have ayil. This I can close for now. I'll leave it open. So we'll get back to it. So what is going on here? Let's take a look at Leviticus 9:2. About 20 minutes or so. Okay. Okay, so here we have ayil. So this is the sacrifices, right? So let's see what is going on here. All right, so ayil here and here we have ayal. So these are two different words, apparently. Okay, so notice, let's just look at a couple of things here. All right, so notice that in the case of a deer, what's being translated deer, okay, we've got a kamatz under the yud. Here there's a hayrik, a dot, an e sound under the yud. We have a patach in both cases under the aleph. So this is ayal, and this is ayil. So to be quite frank, don't understand why these are considered two different words. Let's just see one thing. Okay, so Strong's exhaustive concordance. See, I learned something myself every single time. I'll be the first one to say that. Every time I study, every time I teach, I learn. So Strong's concordance is saying that it's an intensive form of ayil in the sense of ram, a stag or a male deer, a hart. Okay, so here there is a connection between the two. So why are they considered two completely different words? Let's see. Well, once again, let's look at Robert Alter's comment. Oops. So the one category of meat always permitted outside the cult is game, neither deer nor gazelle being among the animals specified for sacrificial use. Now animals otherwise devoted to cult, sheep, bulls, goats, rams, may be eaten without sacrifice just as game is eaten. Okay. I wonder where we can get some information. Let's look at the Ibn Ezra on this one. So this is Deuteronomy 12:15. Take a look at the Ibn Ezra. We won't waste our time with Rashi. Okay. כצבי כאייל שאינו קרב על המזבח וחלב הצבי גם חלב העייל מותר והנה הנה חזוק לדברי רק שמחנו על קבלת אבותינו. Okay, so we can see the English translation here. Okay, so as of the gazelle and of the heart which are not offered on the altar, the fat of the gazelle and also that of the heart is permitted. Look, this is proof of my words. So Ibn Ezra believes that according to the plain meaning of the text, only the fat of an animal that has actually been offered on the altar is forbidden. Okay. However, we rely on tradition of our fathers. According to the rabbis of the Talmud, the fat of an animal that may be offered on the altar is forbidden. Okay. Let me just digest this for 1 second. Unintended. חלב העייל, מותר והנה חזוק לדברי, רק שמחנו שאינו קרב על המזבח וחלב הצבי גם בעייל מותר. Okay, I understand what he's saying. Okay, so so basically, to make a long story short, it's exactly as it says here. Okay, tzvi and the ayil were never offered on the altar, so their fats, their chelev, which is meant to always be given to God, is not forbidden. You can eat the chelev of the tzvi and the ayil, of the gazelle. I'm sorry, the deer and the gazelle. Okay. So is he now implying that the fat of these other animals? 1 second. Okay. Well, this will require more intense study, and we're not going to do it right now. What I do want to do, however, is add these two words. So we now have here in Deuteronomy 12:15, ayal. Grab it from here. Okay, so this is Deuteronomy 12:15. 12:15, and the meaning is gazelle. Oops. I'm sorry, the translation is deer. Deer. Okay, could be a male or female. Could be any age. This. Is that 4 minutes? One second. You freeze. There it is. So species or category. Deer. Okay, so comments has same consonants as isle. So isle. Oops. Again, has the same consonants as. For a second. We'll grab our isle. It's ram. Is isle. And according to what? Strong's exhaustive concordance. This is different from Strong's concordance. According to Strong's exhaustive concordance, is an intensive form of that word. 1 second. Okay. Stag or male deer, so it is a male according to this. So let's add that over here. That really should just be male. Let's see if DB says anything. Okay. Let's add this. Okay, well, there we go. So that's it. So ayal is deer and ayal is ram. All right, fair enough. Let's add one more here. And then I have to pretty much stop the study. So then we're also going to add here Svi. Svi, translated as, oh boy, so many windows open now. Oh my God. There we go. Svi, gazelle. Okay, so that's going to be Svi. So that's gazelle. I'm not sure if it's meant to be a male or female. I'll just leave this male or female for now. Age, any species gazelle. And once again, I'll make a comment that Strong's exhaustive concordance concordance. Relates it to the meaning of the same. Beautiful. Meaning of the same word. Since Israel is considered. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the bottom line is what this verse is saying, and we're running out of time. I'm gonna have to stop pretty much now. Minutes. Is exactly as we're talking about. You're now, if you're sacrificing any animal, even animals that are to be brought as a sacrifice, if you're not slaughtering them in the context of a sacrifice, you're just zavach, you're zoveach chotam, you're slaughtering them to eat, then you do not need to bring them to this central altar that will eventually be in Jerusalem. All right, let me close all of these out. Okay. And we'll go on a little bit more. So we're here in verse 16. Maybe I'll try. I always say I'll try to do this, but I never do. But maybe what I'll try to do is just read through. Okay. Rak hadam lo tochilu al haaretz tishbachenu kamayim. Lo tuchal lechol b'sha'arecha ma'asar yiranecha wa tiroshcha wa yitzhorecha ubichorot bikarecha wa soncha sonecha lechol nidorecha asher tidor wa nidvotecha u trumat yadecha. So these are not specifically sacrifices, but these are other things which are holy, basically. Okay. Ki'im lifnei Yahweh Elohecha tochlenu b'makom asher yivhar Yahweh Elohecha bo ata ubintcha ubitecha v'abdecha v'amotcha v'halewi asher b'sha'arecha samachta lifnei Yahweh Elohecha b'chol mishlach yardecha. So again, we have that same phrase. שמר לך פן תעזוב את הלוי כל ימיך על אדמתך. כי ירחיב יהוה אלוהיך את גבולך כאשר דיבר לך ואמרת אוכלה בשר כי תעווה נפשך לאכול בשר בכל עוות נפשך תאכל בשר כי ירחק ממך המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך לשום שמו שם וזבחת מבקורך ומשונאך אשר נתן יהוה לך אשר ציוויתיך ואכלת בשעריך בכל אוות נפשך. אך כאשר יאכל את הצבי ואת האייל כן תאכלנו, הטמא והטהור יחדיו יאכלנו. It's basically a repeat of what we saw earlier, except with this added directive, or this added this addition of when the borders are widened. Rak hazak lebilti achol. I mean, this is almost a repetition of this. Hadam ki hadam hu hanafesh velo tochal hanefesh im ha-basar. Lo tochlenu al haaretz tishbachenu kamayim. לא תאכלנו למען ייטב לך ולבניך אחריך כי תעשה הישר בעיני יהוה. רק קודשיך אשר יראו לך ונדריך תישא ובאת אל המקום אשר יבחר יהוה. ועשית עולותיך הבשר הדם על מזבח יהוה אלוהיך ודם זבחיך שפך על מזבח יהוה אלוהיך והבשר תאכל. שמור ושמעת את כל הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך למען ייטב לך ולבניך אחריך עד עולם כי תעשה טוב והישר בעיני יהוה אלוהיך. Okay. So this is an important two words in Karaism, and I think we'll stop after that. Let me just phrase how I want to say this. So the rabbis interpret these two words as proof of the oral law. This is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life. Well, I've heard a lot of ridiculous statements, but this is up there with it. Okay, so they say that this asher tziviticha. So let me translate the verse. Let's start in verse 20, and I'm going to end right after this. Okay. Ki yarchiv Yahweh Elohecha et gvulcha kasher diber lach. When God widens your borders as he has spoken to you. ואמרת, אוכלה בשר כי תאווה נפשך לאכול בשר, וכל אהבת נפשך תאכל בשר, and you desire to eat meat, I'll just paraphrase it. כי ירחק ממך המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך לשום שמו שם, וזבחת מקרך מצונך אשר נתן יהוה לך כאשר ציוויתיך וחת בשעריך בכל עת אהבת נפשך. Okay, so if this place כי ירחק ממך המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך לשום שמו שם, if this place that I shall choose is too far away from you, וזבחת מבקרך ומצונך אשר נתן יהוה לך, then you may you may slaughter, just for eating, among your cattle, your cows, and your sheep, which God has given you, as I have commanded you. So the rabbis say, as I have commanded you, this implies this is a hint towards the oral law, and the oral law specifically for the laws of slaughter. So the rabbis have very extensive laws for the slaughtering of animals. I don't know all the laws because I'm a vegetarian, but it has to be right in the jugular vein. The knife has to be non-serrated. It has to be thin. I mean, it has to be smooth, and it has to be sharp, so the animal dies instantly, etc., etc. So the rabbis say that this kasher tziviticha, that you shall slaughter as I have commanded you, means, oh, this is speaking about the oral law, as I've commanded you, according to all the ritual slaughter laws that I've commanded you. That's how the rabbis interpret it. This is a huge polemic between the rabbis and the Karaites. This is, if you're a Karaite and you ever speak to a Rabbinite, this is one that they'll almost always bring up. Okay, that this phrase is referring to the oral law, specifically the laws of slaughter, but it's not at all. Okay, what is this referring to? Okay, well, it's vizavachta kashet tziviticha. You can slaughter these animals as I have commanded you. Where have I commanded you? Well, we said that these phrases are basically a repetition of the ones above. Okay, I've commanded you. Okay, meaning that just above I said you could do the same thing. Okay, this is just a repetition of what we see in verses 15 through 19 in the case where the borders are expanded. That even if the borders are expanded, or even if the reason that you are slaughtering is and not bringing it as a sacrifice because you want to eat it not in the context of a sacrifice because you're far away, then it's the same laws that apply. Okay. It's basically a repetition. Kasher tziviticha is not referring to the laws, the ritual laws of slaughter, as the rabbis would imply. It's referring to all of these laws that come up above, specifically these laws from 15 to 19. Okay? And with that, I'm going to end this week's study. I thank you all for joining me. And I wish you all Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. And I'll see you Be'ezarat Yahweh.